Everyone loves good curb appeal, right? I mean, it has the word appeal right in it. Pleasant entryways, a fresh coat of paint, pretty landscaping. Who can argue with that? But if that's true, why would anyone call some of the most accomplished and appealing curbside views inauthentic signifiers of good design? Or even eerie or creepy? In this episode, we'll take a close look at curb appeal from a few architectural points of view, from its appealing and its not so appealing. Stay tuned. Hello, my name is Stuart Hicks, and I teach architecture and design studios and lecture courses in history and theory at the University of Illinois in Chicago. The term curb appeal probably developed around 1975, with the practice of interested potential homebuyers driving to visit properties prior to viewing photographs of them. This is well before Zillow or Redfin or even the MLS system for exploring available housing stock, so visiting them in person was the only way to determine if it was a potential option. Buildings with ample amounts of curb appeal would be the ones that potential buyers that wanted to come back to and visit with their agent in order to investigate it further. Curb appeal came to describe the attractiveness of a property for sale and its surroundings when viewed from the street. One artist/architect who was critical of this development very early on was Dan Graham, who created a fictional proposal for an alteration to a suburban house, set in a town that I actually used to live in Urbana, Illinois. As conveyed in the models that he made, the proposal shows a typical house subdivided into two parts, the front and the back. The dividing line is provided by a mirror where the front of the facade is rendered as all glass. To be clear, Dan Graham doesn't really think that anyone would want to live or should live like this. Instead, the project exists as a kind of statement or commentary on the role of the house in modern domestic life. In his reconfiguration, the house is turned into a billboard of the life inside, revealing the stuff that is usually hidden behind the facade. Further, the mirror reflects the image of the house across the street. It's a billboard advertising ideal suburban houses to be sold. However, without any traditional facade, only life is on display, flattened against a visual illusion of a facade. He was skeptically seeking a kind of curb appeal that was truthfully and directly derived from the house instead of applied to it through paint or ornament. Despite Dan Graham's critique, the term curb appeal and the beautification that it implies gained increased popularity during the housing boom of the early 2000s with the proliferation of housing flipping shows and guides. According to the Journal of Real Estate Finance and Economics, curb appeal can actually account for an increase of 7% in the asking price of your home if done correctly. This amount of added value has led to the formation of a profession called the curb appeal designer as a special type of exterior design expert. Their tips and suggestions pay particular attention to dramatic roof lines, non-traditional materials and color combinations, architectural focal points with differing heights, classical landscape shrubbery, and stylish hardscapes. In architecture, concepts that are related to curb appeal date back a few hundred years. This long history means that these concepts have had a chance to cycle through popularity a few different times, with multiple chances for earnest advocates and the most skeptical critics, like Dan Graham, to get a chance to weigh in on the debate. The way I see it, there are three main lines of inquiry here: the dominance of the visual aesthetic response, two, within the visual field of finding appeal and attractiveness, and then three, the desirable relationship of the building to its surroundings. Immediately, definitions of curb appeal sound a lot like the picturesque, which was an aesthetic category in landscape design theory that actually evolved out of the practice of landscape painting. William Gilpin, the 18th century English clergyman and artist, famously defined it as the peculiar kind of beauty which is agreeable in a picture. The picturesque was an important means to conceive of landscapes and their design as a way of moving forward from French beautiful gardens, the ones that look like Versailles, with tightly manicured and geometrically arranged plants and paths. This kind of landscape demonstrates humans' power to tame and control nature by bending it to the visible conformity of our ideas of order. Picturesque gardens and design strategies look pretty familiar to us today. In some ways, it's so successful that a lot of people can look at a picturesque landscape and think it is just a natural occurrence rather than a designed habitat. Frederick Law Olmsted in New York Central Park is one of the most famous and successful examples, but there are many, many more. The famous Chicago architect Daniel Burnham said of Olmsted that he paints with lakes and wooded slopes, with lawns and banks and forest-covered hills. But it doesn't stop there, because Olmsted also designed suburban neighborhoods like Riverside, Illinois, near Chicago, also using the principles derived from picturesque techniques. These are a certain degree of roughness and sudden variations in form, color, and lighting, things scaled just right, not being too big or not being too small, winding paths with varied views and opportunities for surprise. Olmsted wrote that using these techniques in Riverside, Illinois, and the generous spaces and the setbacks of homes would lead to leisure, contemplativeness, and happy tranquility. These picturesque principles all ensure the actual landscape can look like a satisfying painting, one that disregards symmetry and perfect proportions in favor of accidental irregularity. The paintings of Claude Lorraine often serve as a model that a proper picturesque landscape might emulate. While this seems like a surefire approach to the creation of pleasing real-life scenes, the appropriation of a flat image-based principles of composition to evaluate real life brought certain strange assumptions. For a time, people were so excited to perceive the world as a painting, they would walk around with a device that they called the Claude glass, named after the painter Claude Lorraine. The Claude glass is usually a small convex mirror that is grayed out a bit. The way to use it is when you come upon a particularly pleasant landscape, you turn around to your back, holding your back to the landscape, you pick up your mirror, and you look at the landscape behind you. The mirror's convex shape pushes more scenery into a single focal point in the reflection, and the gray smoke coloring of the lens shifts the tones of the reflection to those that are more easily reproduced with the limited color palette that painters employ. It's like people couldn't appreciate their surroundings through direct experience. They needed it translated through the lens of painting or framed in a mirror in order to understand its full glory. Fast forwarding back to the 1970s and to discuss directly the curb appeal in American homes, the architecture firm Venturi Scott Brown curated an exhibition that they called Signs of Life, where they used photography to be able to really see what's going on with the architecture of curb appeal. The architects sent the photographer, Stephen Shore, all across the country to photograph homes in a straightforward, deadpan manner. His photographs were printed huge using a brand new printing technology that was physically actually more like digital painting. The goal of the curators was to represent the typical American suburban houses and landscapes without any preconceived ideas about whether they were good or bad. Simply by photographing them and presenting them in the context of the museum as printed photographs, they could allow others to make their own judgments. Like the Claude mirror, the exhibition allows visitors to see what they wouldn't have seen if they were actually immersed in the spaces of their focus. Plucked from their context, the everyday houses have become the subject of curiosity and wonder. In addition to the collections of photographs, the exhibitions featured large-scale dioramas of curbside scenes complemented by comic book-style talk bubbles, which provided information about the stylistic origin of lawn and architectural elements on display. They called these allusions to old world elements of architecture symbols. So the ornament made from unskilled craftsmen or bought at the department store, they're not really Georgian or neoclassical elements. Rather, they're more like allusions to them. Venturi Scott Brown also recognized that these symbols represented the ideals and the aspirations of their owners through architecture. They are important displays of material success and taste, which can be read or understood from an outside of an automobile driving down the road at 35 miles per hour. These symbols don't follow the standard rules of older style buildings that they come from. Rather, they form a hodgepodge of elements to create a sense of variety and contrast. Once you think of the house as an image, you're free to compose a pleasant mishmash of things that coalesce nicely together. You're not constrained by some consistent construction logic of style or structure. The house itself is only one component of curb appeal, though. Another is the clean and manicured patch of green grass of a singular type with no weeds. A proper lawn should be no more than 1.5 inches tall, and of course neatly edged. To have a well-maintained lawn is a sign to others that you have the time and the money to support the attraction. This means the owner must be willing to care for it. It must be watered and mowed, repaired and cultivated, and it signifies that you care about belonging and want others to see that you are like them. A properly maintained lawn tells others that you are a good neighbor, or that you took care of the house, and the owners need not worry about deferred maintenance. There's another seminal architect-led exhibition related to curb appeal, but which focuses on the lawn. It was curated by Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro in the late 1990s. They were a little less agnostic, though, and were set on revealing the seedy underbelly of the practices of lawn design and maintenance. They wanted to reveal the lawn as an engineered product, patented, and subject to laws of industry and genetic science. In the show, they included a multimedia presentations and stereographic photos of unneighborly lot lines between properties. They included an inventory and a taxonomy of lawn blemishes, a chronology of cleated turf shoes, a selection of grass species and species of astroturf, and archival news footage of political activity that are involving lawns. They approach the lawn under suspicion, with the assumption that its perfect and imageable qualities make it a good candidate to mask less appealing truths. This is also a popular subject of television shows and movies, like The Truman Show, which attempt to reveal the superficial veil of pleasantness of curb appeal as like a mask or a film set. Of course, The Truman Show was filmed in an actual place that was called Seaside, Florida, a planned community with a host of rules that govern and maintain the curb appeal of its homes. And again, there's a strange resonance between the idea of an image of something and the reality that it represents. Planned and designed by the firm Duane, Platter, Zyberg and Company, Seaside is the poster child of what they call New Urbanism, an urban design strategy for ensuring pleasant, pedestrian-friendly communities. And in order to achieve this, they developed form-based codes that regulate the three-dimensional shapes or forms of buildings in the public realm. These codes focus less on properties' uses, like normal codes, than they do on factors that determine the character of a place, such as the building frontage and its placement. While pleasant on the surface, this overt control and strict adherence to uniformity allows the image mass to take over the entirety of the city. This kind of uniformity has its costs at the expense of being exclusionary of individual freedoms. So while curb appeal has its appeal, a number of architects have been critical of its over-attention to pleasantness and the easy assumption that real life can operate like a picture. The picture can be a way of looking at something with a close and critical eye, or it can be a way of framing out all the things that are unpleasant and focusing only on the superficial layer in front of the camera without regard to what's just behind it. Thanks for sticking it out this long, and please feel free to check out some of my other videos if you found this one interesting or entertaining or helpful. Thanks a lot. See you later.